Cosmic News with the most trusted voice in the universe, Dirk Bradshaw. And now, here's Dirk. I'm Dirk Bradshaw for CosmicNewsNetwork.com. Wake up, universe. Well, we've been doing a lot of reporting and investigating with this ClimateGate. And Lord knows, we've dedicated enough CO2 towards it to start another El Nino. But what could we do? Someone had to talk about it. The media and the powers that be were not talking about it. Least of all, the man who invented global warming, Mr. Al Gore. Well, finally, tonight, he decided to dedicate a few minutes with us to discuss his side of a very inconvenient truth.
Exclusive interview.
He's also the author of Our Choice. It's a new book, A Plan to Solve the Climate Crisis. Mr. Vice President, thanks for dropping by. It's always great to see you.
Always a pleasure.
We should let folks know, too, we're going to spend an extended amount of time on this because there's lots of questions to ask. First and foremost among them, I'm sure that you're familiar with what's being dubbed ClimateGate. University of East Anglia, the Climatic Research Center, all of those emails that were hacked. We saw language like trick used, hide the decline, resistance to Freedom of Information Act requests. I wonder what your thoughts are about this, and on the surface at the very least, does it look suspicious?
Well, they took a few phrases out of context. These are private emails more than 10 years old, and they've tried to blow it up into something that it's really not. Just to pick one example, some of those exchanges you're talking about had to do with years ago whether or not a study that they thought was of poor quality and shouldn't belong in the scientific report should be excluded from the report. Well, they had exchanges back and forth. It ended up in the report, right. Fully analyzed and discussed. So if you take one little thing from 10 years ago out of context and describe it inaccurately, then it becomes a controversy without any real substance.
Some of them were from 10 years ago, but many of them were far more recent than that, some as recent as last year. But, you know, I talked with Professor Peter Liss, who is the interim director of the Climatic Research Unit. He thought that, in fact, this would have some sort of an impact on public opinion, that people who weren't sure or were skeptical might become more so. What do you think?
Well, that's a separate question. Is there any substantive reason to worry about them? No. Does the noise machine of the climate deniers blow them out of proportion and fool some people into thinking they have substance? Well, that's another matter, and I don't know how to respond to that. Over time, the scientific process whereby all these scientists pick over every detail openly and fully, that process works, and that's the process they followed.
You know, it's interesting, in some parts of the book you talk about how it was harder to prove concrete or to have concrete examples several years ago, but as we've progressed in the years, it's gotten easier and easier to point to data suggesting this. Yet there are still people like Senator Inhofe, who's going to this Copenhagen summit, who says that it's the greatest hoax ever perpetrated. And when we talk about public opinion, it's dropped a little bit in terms of whether or not global warming is caused by humans. In fact, we asked it last year, 54% believed that. We asked it just last week, and only 45% believe it. Is it frustrating for you to think that perhaps less people believe humans are responsible for at least some of our climate change?
Well, again, if you put it in a longer context, 10, 12 years ago, when the last of these big meetings took place, virtually no heads of state went. There was still a raging debate on points that have long since been settled. Now, more than 70 heads of state are going to be in Copenhagen. They're close to getting a final agreement. It'll probably be finalized next year after the political agreement that's expected next week. But to the first part of your question, there's an air of unreality about the discussion of arcane points from emails from long ago. The North Polar ice cap is melting before our very eyes. It's been the...
In light of the newest exposed information and revelations of the largest corruption and conspiracy in modern history, right to the Executive Office of the United States of America, someone damn well needs to be indicted and prosecuted in the worldwide hoax of man-made global warming, starting with the past Vice President Al Gore.